Welcome to the world map of Final Fantasy VII. Oh my god, this game has a world map in it, and it is time to once again get hot and heavy as we talk about world map mechanics. So, as you run around the world map, the first place to go, routing-wise, is we go straight to Chocobo Ranch, but first let's talk about the mechanics here for a minute. One thing that is of note here is that you have fractions on the world map, just like you do on fields, but these fractions are a little bit different. They, instead of counting up by 32 and rolling over at 256 for a total of 8 frames per rollover, on the world map they actually count up by 1 every frame, and they roll over at 17. So it's every 17 frames of movement that you get a rollover of your fractions, and that's when your danger increments. But the world map doesn't have a walking versus running, but there are still different danger incrementation values, and those different danger incrementations are given based on what ground type you're standing on. So, as you can see right now, we are on ground type 9. But if I step onto the grass right down here, that ground type updates to 0. And then the edge of a mountain is 16. But yeah, ground type 0, 16, or there's 9. And so depending on which ground type I'm on, when the rollover happens, you'll notice that, that the danger incrementation is different. So if I'm on the grass, when the rollover occurs, we got 512 danger, but if I'm in the dirt, we get 819. So grass has significantly less danger than this dirt does, for example. And so how the actual encounter logic is working as far as when you get into a battle, it's the same kind of thing where every frame that you're moving, your fractions increase, and every time that they roll over, you get a danger incrementation, and at that point, the game compares your danger to the encounter table, to the corresponding current value on the encounter table, and if your danger value is higher, you get into a battle. Just like on fields, however, you may notice that there is a lack of step ID here, and that is because the corresponding value on the encounter table that I'm talking about actually works very differently on the world map. Oh, and you'll also notice that also just like on fields, after you get into a battle, your danger is reset to 0. So instead of having step ID be an index as to where on the encounter table you are, like Ace is saying in the chat here, there isn't really an encounter table on the world map. Instead, there is just general world map RNG table, and that RNG table actually is much more random than it is on fields because its generation is based, it's seeded based on your in-game time when you enter the world map. So it is actually different, it's much more random, and it's not part of your step route. I think that that's really important to mention, is that your movement and your battles that you get on the world map have nothing to do with your step ID, your formation ID. It's all separate from that, and it's much more random because it's seeded based on your in-game time when you load into the world map. So, how it interacts here is that you've got this world map RNG index that goes up on any frame that you are pressing left or right or R or L. You see it increased by several frames as I pressed either of those buttons for several frames. If you move up or down, the world map RNG index did not increase except for when fractions rolled over, because that also causes a world map RNG index increase. So this index is similar to step ID in that it is your position on the RNG table that is going to be used for the battle check against your danger to see if you should get into a battle. but it's very different in the way that it behaves as far as its incrementation goes. It goes up by 1 when fractions roll over. It also goes up by 1 any frame where you are pressing the right, left, R1, or L1 buttons. It also goes up in another circumstance. I think about right here. Yes, you may notice right now it's just going up on its own, and it wasn't doing that before. What's causing that to happen is actually the Midgar Zolom. We are now close enough on the world map to have loaded in the region that contains the Midgar Zolom. And so he's bouncing around and also making calls to RNG for his behavior, and that's the same RNG table. And just like with list and stone, this index, it increments every time it's called, you know? Or I should say just like with list. And so those are kind of the most basic mechanics of exactly why you get into battles, or exactly like how the game decides when you get into battles during the world map. Is every 17 frames that you're running around, the game increments your danger and checks whether you should get into a battle. Now, there are a couple more things of note. You'll notice that when we get into a battle, our danger resets to 0. After you get out of a battle, we were just in a battle and we escaped. After you get out of a battle, and the same thing here actually occurs when you exit a town, your fractions get set to negative 140, which is another huge difference between world map fractions and field fractions. So what this means is you actually have 140 frames now of free movement before your fractions are even 0. And then at that point, you have 17 more frames before they roll over for the first time. So from where I was just standing until where I just went on that last frame, that was the first time that our danger incremented and the first time that the game checked for a battle after the previous battle. You get a ton of free movement after a battle or when you leave a town before it's possible to get into a battle again. And there's one more thing to do to take full advantage of this. Hang on, we're getting pincered. If you get pincered, assuming that you have enough grenades, I would recommend grenading this guy. I think 1 grenade plus a regular attack would do it, actually. You probably don't need a double grenade. 1 grenade plus a regular attack should do the trick. But okay, so check this out now. If I am already holding, if I am buffering movement, already holding a button as we leave the battle, take a look here as we load in. When our fractions go to negative 140, take a look at the world map RNG index as well as we go frame by frame here. Something very interesting happens. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so our RNG index just loaded in at 520. That's where it starts. And then our fractions are at negative 140, just like they start after a battle. But I am already buffering movement, and observe what happens here. Oh, there we go. Okay, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 frames, 14 frames right there. Oh, yeah, Zalem called RNG once. Good call, Ace. We got 13 frames of movement before our fractions started changing as well. And during that time, if you look, I mean, we got the battle back here, and we're up here now. We actually got 13 extra frames of movement there before our fractions started going down. So on the world map, after a battle or loading in from town, there's actually 13 frames before your fractions start moving where you can move if you're buffering your movement. And so just to absolutely optimize your movement and reduce your chances of getting into battles as much as possible, you should be buffering your movement out of battles, buffering your movement out of towns. So those are some interesting mechanics of the world map. Like right here, we want to be buffering to the right in order to get down to the Chocobo Ranch here. So, let's talk about everything that means for this entire world map traversal before we get into the super high level stuff. And by high level, I mean low level stuff, depending on what kind of, you know, what kind of terminology people like to use. So, of note, those 13 frames I just mentioned are not possible to be taken advantage of leaving Midgar because of this text box. Those 13 frames have already passed before this thing even types out. But in order to get to the Chocobo Ranch, what you want to do is get down to the grass as quickly as possible. So, what I would do if I'm not manipulating, which we'll talk about later, what I would do is start out by buffering down right, and then go right until you see this kind of darker line right here. I like to kind of get Cloud right into that zone and start going right from there. And the reason is that gets you into regular grass more quickly, which has lower danger incrementation. We got a battle pretty quickly though here, so in a battle, you would just want to run away with RL, left circle. Kind of dangerously here, I forgot to cure the party. One thing that you should probably do is go into your menu and cure the party. And one thing of note right there is that on fields, I mentioned that you can hold in triangle in order to open the menu as soon as you possibly can. The menu will just open as soon as it can if you're holding triangle. That's actually not the case on the world map. You have to press triangle when it will accept the input. Alright, so the biggest threat on making your way to Chocobo Ranch, basically, is getting a pincer attack from the muggers. And I kind of actually hope that we get another one, just so we can show it in a place that's easier to edit together. But yeah, if you have the grenades, which if you manipulated the elevator, you like definitely will. If you saved grenades throughout Midgar, if you have enough grenades, you can grenade him once, and then if you have a regular attack available, give him a regular attack. Otherwise, probably just grenade him again, and make your way to Chocobo Ranch as soon as you possibly can. But we've got a couple more things to talk about with the world map here real quick. So, speaking of fractions, this is jumping ahead in the game a little bit, but since we're talking about fractions right now, I think that this is another thing that we should talk about. Which is that, so when you leave Gold Saucer, you have those negative 140 fractions like you would expect, but now, first of all, notice that when you're on something like this, your fractions actually don't move. So there's certain things where your fractions don't move on, such as these. And then there's also things like, you see the crumbling sand here. If you're on that, your fractions also don't move, but they do on the regular sand. And then there's also another thing. Check this out. When you exit a vehicle in this game, your fractions actually update to negative 30. And you can keep on doing that. If you get back in the buggy, there's still negative 30. So if you go down for about a second, and then you exit the buggy and get back in, you just reset your fractions again. And you can keep on doing this. And if you keep on doing this, you will never get into a battle, because the game won't even check for a battle, because your fractions aren't going up to 17. And you can do it quickly, too. It's as you're going, just hit X and hold circle. And that's all you have to do, is just as you don't even have to stop holding the D-pad. So just every about 1.5 seconds, less than 1.5 seconds, just hit X and hold circle. You don't even have to stop holding circle, but I find that to be a really awkward position to do it with. I don't really like to do it that way, but yeah, you don't have to ever stop holding circle. Because the reason is, if you run at a vehicle holding circle, Cloud gets right in it. So that's actually another little interesting thing, is holding circle while running towards a vehicle. We'll get into it very quickly, or as soon as possible. But yeah, the way I do it is just tap X and then hold circle, because I find that easiest to do with the thumb. So there you go. That's just a little. Once we get into vehicles, that's a little trick. You've probably seen runners doing this, calling it buggy skipping, but yeah, this is exactly what is happening when you see this. It is that the fractions are being reset to -30 every time, which means that the game will never even check for an encounter. And if you accidentally let one tick slip through, like right there, all that happened was we gained some danger. We could have gotten into a battle, but having higher danger now doesn't mean that we might get into a battle now, because no, as long as you continue to execute your buggy skips properly, the game, even your danger could be 1,000,000, right? And it just won't even check for it. So that's just another that is just another interesting aspect of the world map and fractions, but that is jumping ahead a bit. So let's get back to where we are on the walkthrough. So at this point in the game, we are actually going to skip Calm. We don't need to go to Calm, and we go straight to the Chocobo Ranch so that we can learn to catch a Chocobo. And so in order to get there, I showed you, just the basic path of running to the right and running down. On average, you're going to get 2 or 3 encounters here. If you're very lucky, you'll only get 1. If you're very unlucky, you'll get 4. But on average, you would get 2 or 3 encounters on the way to the Chocobo Ranch, and you hope that none of them are a pincer, because those are a big waste of time. But I mentioned earlier that your world map RNG index is seeded based on your in-game time when the world map loads. And that is actually very useful, because I need to make a save state after Barrett skip here. Okay, so you've done Barrett skip, right? And you pick Let's Go, and then here is the last text box from Eris. Now, normally, if you're not manipulating, you would just run down out of this text box to leave. But if you are going to manipulate, at this point, you would open the menu instead, because we are going to use our in-game time in order to get fewer battles on the world map. Now, this happens to be a very particularly difficult manipulation, this first one, because remember how the Midgar Zolom interacts with the world map RNG index? Basically, the way that the manipulation works is we need to load the world map on a certain in-game time, and that will load the RNG index in a favorable way. But it's only favorable if we know when the battle checks are occurring, because the index increases every single frame that we're holding right, L, R, or left, and every time that the fractions roll over, and every time that the Midgar Zolom calls RNG. All of those things go forward on the world map RNG index. However, it's only checking for a battle when the fractions roll over. So we need to load the RNG table in a way where those index values that the battle checks occur on are the low enough ones to not get us into a battle for as long as possible. Now, this is a pretty long traversal. There's not really a way to get 0 encounters on it, unless there might be a couple in-game times, but they would be very few and far between. So instead, we're going to manipulate getting just 1 battle. So, this is work that was done by Ace Zephyr, writing a more Python scripts and whatnot in order to simulate the world map and what you do on it in order to find which in-game times are good. And so I spoke kind of incorrectly before when I said that we leave on a certain in-game time. That's not exactly correct. what we do is we see what our in-game time is, and then look for the next viable in-game time that has a manipulation, and we go with that. And so, right now, because of this tutorial, we're at a quite high in-game time, so I'm just going to use BizHawk to cheat here and lower it to something significantly lower that we can use. Something more like you would see in a run in order to perform a manipulation. So, what you would do in a run here is see that you are in this area of in-game time, and we'll get into how to predict this more easily in a minute. This part actually gets a little bit easier, but for now, we can say, okay, so we're at 128.30. I'm going to pause it here, and the manip that we can go with is going to be 128.41, let's say. Actually, that one's got a lot of menus. Let's go with the 128.43 here. Actually, let's go with the 128.44. That'll be the easiest one to show right off the bat. So 128.44 on the list here is quite favorable because you see that the other instructions are 0 and 0. We'll get into those instructions later, but what that means for now is that you just go. The first thing to know is that when I was talking about what to do like casually before, I mentioned that you would hold down and right to get down to that dark area at first. If you're manipulating, you don't do that. You run straight right. So, we're on BizHawk, which means we also have to account for load times. On PlayStation console with fast disk speed, you don't have to worry about this. But on BizHawk, 128.44 actually means 128.42.5. So let's unpause here. And we'll go 128.42.5, and then leave. And now what you'll see the effect of that is, you saw how often we were getting into battles before, but now if we run right, straight right, and then right around here we actually do cut down right to go into the grass, but we wait until we do it there. So now at this point, remember I mentioned that the whole purpose here with this manipulation is that we left on an in-game time that built the RNG table in such a way where our fractions are going to be rolling over on predictable world map RNG indices. And so what that means is, in order to keep our fractions and our world map RNG index synced, we have to be holding right. As far as this particular manip goes, we have to be holding right on every frame that we're moving. We cannot do any movement of just up or down because that would move Cloud without incrementing the index, and then it throws them off sync. We also need to always be moving because remember the Midgar Zolom? We have now loaded in the Midgar Zolom, so he also needs to be calling RNG at predictable times that this manip setup has already accounted for. And so if we stop moving, that stops our fractions and our index from movement. And now, let's say the Zolom called RNG on a different frame. Now, the next time that our fractions roll over, our index is no longer predictable. So, what that all means is as long as we're only moving right here or up and right, down and right, you don't want to zigzag too much because it's suboptimal, but like you can, do diagonals, start going down right about right here. We don't get a battle until right there. That's a super late battle, even with my kind of suboptimal example movement. With my suboptimal example movement, we still got a battle very late there, which means that we are very likely here to only get a single battle. Because as you see, 1, 2, 3, there were only 3 battle checks between where we left off and the Chocobo Ranch there, with pretty low danger on them. So that right there is how, that's the idea of the manipulation, and that was an example of a very easy one, where you don't have to do any funny business. So the whole purpose, I hope that's clear, is that you load in at a time where you've constructed the RNG table, so that then, if you keep your fractions and your index synced by doing controlled movement, such as only holding right, or always having right held, would be the more precise way to say that, then all of your battle checks occur on predictable RNG indices, which is important because they are also ones that are going to be good RNG, they're going to be good RNG values at those indices. Let's talk about these in a order that gets slightly more complicated as we go. So the next one that we should do is probably the 128.47 manip, because that one has some left movement in it, and we'll talk about that for a second. So that's at 47, which for BizHawk is 45.5, which gives us time to heal the party. And then 45.5. Okay. So for this one, if you were to leave on this in-game time, the instruction is to go 4 left. And so what that means is, remember how I was talking about when the Midgar Zolom loads? The Midgar Zolom, as I've just been corrected about, only calls RNG if clouds X and Y coordinates, basically if you're close enough to it. If you are close enough to the Midgar Zolom, that's when it starts calling RNG in order to check. And so if we run directly right from Midgar, then there is a certain frame that his checks start occurring on. And so on that last example that we showed for the manipulation, it all worked out just right. However, for some in-game times, like this one that we just picked, we need to offset our starting index and our starting fractions just a little bit before we load in the Zolom. And so the way that we achieve that on this particular in-game time that we did is to go left for 4 frames before we start going right. Okay, so those 4 left taps are 1, 2, 3, 4, and so what that's done now is our fractions are now negative 136, our index is 3, because we've moved for 4 frames, because the index actually, it doesn't start at 0, it starts at 520, and then it rolls over to 0 on the first frame that you move, so it being at 3 actually means it's been called 4 times. Fractions being at negative 136 means that we've moved for 4 frames. So then, naturally, when we start holding right now, that means it also took 4 frames for us to get back into the starting position. So by doing the 4 left, that actually offset our fractions and index by 8. But that is necessary because with this in-game time's particular construction of the RNG table, we want our Zolom, when we load in the Zolom, which occurs about, I think it occurs about now, is when the Zolom it starts to call RNG. That is now going to assist in him loading in on this frame particularly. If it let's just say, for example, it is exactly this frame, then now our fractions and our index are at a good spot to where our battle checks are going to happen on those frames where we want them to occur. And so with those 4 left inputs at the start, you'll see that this also is a very, very favorable RNG outcome. And with pretty much all these manips, you're expecting to get the battle around here. Alright. Once again, always be buffering your movement out of a battle so that you get those free 13 frames of movement. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I moved slightly suboptimally because I was looking at my RAM watch instead of the game. But yeah, we got 4 battle checks there. So once again, this list here was generated by Ace Zephyr, using a Python script that he wrote to simulate the world map. crazy amount of research and work went into this, and so for us as players, as runners, all we have to do is match the in-game time and follow the instructions, and then if you are super curious, this number right here is how many frames you'll go before you get into a battle. So you can actually at a glance see that, like, this manip, for example, gets you significantly farther than this one does before getting into that first battle. And then the number on the very right refers to the actual encounter that you're going to get into. Like, I want to say 51, right? Is it a back attack or... Because one thing is that this manip will not only have it take a long time for you to get into a battle, but it will also avoid pincers. Because judging by RNG, once again, being manipulated, we can avoid getting into a pincer. Okay, so let's show one more, or let's show another. We showed if it's 0-0, you don't got to do anything except run right. If it's 4 left, you got to go 4 left. Let's show a one that includes downs. So 4 left and 3 down might be one that you get, for example. So that's at 129.01, which in BizHawk time is 128.59 and a half. So here we go, 128.59 and a half. All right, 4 left, 3 down. And so that was 4 left, and then 3 down. There we go. So now, oh, and so you'll notice that RNG index, once again, just to solidify all of this, RNG index only incremented 4 times there, not 7. Even though we moved for 7 frames, our fractions changed by 7. So that's because we went 4 to the left, and left, right, L1, R1 increases your RNG index. Up and down do not. So by going down for 3 frames, we incremented our fractions 3 more times, but not our RNG index. So if you're wondering what the purpose is for this weird movement of having to go 4 left and then 3 down, it's so that we offset our fractions and index in such a way where now they're going to be synced up how we want them to be. You know, once again, also in a specific spot in space, left and right, so that when the Midgar Zolom loads in, we don't have a bad time. So the left inputs are to increase both your fractions and RNG index before the Zolom loads in, and then the down inputs are to just change your fractions without changing the RNG index, and without making the left-right movement any different. And so there you go. That's another working manip that got us a very favorable outcome here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 5 battle ticks for that one, but still, or battle checks for that one, but still not enough to get into a second battle. And there you go. So every one of these manips so far has gotten us a single encounter on the way to the Chocobo Ranch. Which, remember, like I said before, you get 2 or 3 on average just going randomly. All right, so now let's do one of the manips that has menus involved. So if you're looking at this particular list and you see 5 left, 2 menu, let's try that one. So that's 128.47. Which in BizHawk language is 128.45 and a half. All right, so 5 left, 2 menu. Let's talk about that real quick. So if we go, our 5 left, so we've gone 5 left. Let's talk about what happens if you menu while you are running right. So, all of the rules that we know so far are that if you're holding left, right, L, or R, your RNG index increases. Which means that by holding L or R, which, if you don't know, just spins the camera around, that will increase your index without increasing your fractions. And if you move just up or down, that increases your fractions without increasing your RNG index. except for when the rollovers occur or when the Zolom checks RNG. So, there is another, one more aspect to getting them exactly synced up right in order for a manipulation to work. So, by moving down on the last example, we incremented our fractions without incrementing our RNG index. However, check this out. So I'm going to pause and then while running right here, so we did the 5 left movements, but now check out what happens. Keep your eye here on fractions and RNG index. I'm going to advance the frame by 1, and as expected, you'll see that they both went up by 1. One more frame, they both went up by 1. Now for the next frame, though, I'm going to be holding triangle to go into the menu. And you'll see that the index increased, and the fractions did not increase. But if you saw the screen, cloud did go right for a frame. So now if I unpause here, and then get back in, and then we do it again. So those two menus, what each of those do is sort of the opposite of what moving down does. They increase your RNG index without increasing your fractions. Another way, theoretically, or like another way that this can happen is just if you press R or L, right? However, that does not move cloud when you do that. First of all, that throws your camera off, and that would just be a big pain. But then also, for this particular manipulation, that would cause you to not load the Zolom in on the correct frame, especially if your camera is different. So the menuing is another tool that you might have to do in order to offset your fractions and RNG index a certain way, in order to get a working manipulation. So when exactly you menu, as long as it's before that spot I showed you, that where the Zolom starts counting RNG, right? As long... Whoa, that was a good one. As long as you do it before then, you're fine. It's not precise what frame you have to menu on, and you don't have to exit the menu on a certain IGT or anything like that. It's just menu while you are holding the direction, and then exit the menu. If you have to do it again, do it again. And that's all there is to it there. So, let's show one more example that includes menus. Oh yeah, that's a good point also. You don't have to be holding your movement as you exit the menu necessarily. It's good to, because it's faster to be doing that, but it won't throw the manip off if you're not, because the Zolom isn't loaded in. So we'll talk about that in a moment as we do one more, which is a 5 left and 3 menu at 128.52. So at 128.52. So this is 5 left, 3 menu. So just like we can take... So the reason that you don't have to be holding the direction as you exit the menu is the same reason that we can stand here and take our time doing these 5 left inputs, because these numbers that we're caring about right now are only changing when we move, right? Now that we've loaded the RNG table, IGT doesn't matter anymore. So we can take our time with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we start going. And yeah, you can menu, exit, don't have to be moving here because it just starts going as you start moving. What does matter is that you're moving when you pressed menu, because that's what causes you to get movement and get an RNG index increase without your fractions going up. And now we go. So that one was a 5 left and 3 down. And once again, we should see a beautiful world map traversal here, where we should only get one encounter. I have gotten 2 encounters before, just from being very unlucky, but it's very rare and unlucky for that to happen. This time the Manip got us so far that I don't know if it's even possible. But hey, we can check if it's possible. Let's take a look at our fractions here and our danger, and we'll see if a battle check even occurs here. No. In fact, we had a lot of time to spare. We had an entire 54 frames, almost 2 more seconds of free movement before a battle check even occurred. So, that is world map manipulation specifically from Midgar to the Chocobo Ranch. And so there is one more aspect for us to talk about. And that is the fact that it would take too long for you to get to this part in the world, then open up your menu, look at the in-game time, then look at the list, right? Go, okay, 40, okay, like 47, okay, and then you do the 47, and then you look at what your instructions are, right? That's too much, that's too chaotic. So let me give you a tip on executing this. If you are in the middle of a run and you're fighting Motorball, yeah, you're in the middle of a run, you've got your splits up, everything's good, and here Motorball dies. So where I personally split for a boss is as I confirm the spoils. And so that occurs right here. So right there, as I confirmed the spoils, I split. And so as I'm doing this as I'm just mashing this next cutscene, I look at this number, RTA, that I split at, which was 130.49. 130.49 is where I split right there. If you add 36 seconds to that, assuming that you get Barrett skip first try, if you add 36 seconds to that, that is a pretty good indicator of about where your IGT is going to be. So 49 plus 36 is like 85, right? Roll it over at the 60, so that's like 25. So about 131.25 is when you would expect to be opening your menu. And so during your mashing, you would just do that math real quick, and then come over here and look at this and see, oh, there's a Manip at 131.26. That's 2 left, 1 menu. How convenient. So you just plan out in your head that you're going to leave at 131.26 while you are mashing through this cutscene. So when we open the menu, look at that, 131.24. So the 36 seconds rule is pretty good there, 35, 36, because if I were to choose to manip at 131.26, then right here we would have been just in time for it, and we knew that we were going to be there based on our RTA, assuming, of course, that you start time on at 0 on new game, which you should, and assuming that you split on confirming the spoils at Motorball, and assuming you got Barrett skip first try. If all those things are true, your in-game time when you open the menu here will be quite predictable, and thus you can look ahead on this sheet and plan out which manip you're going to do ahead of time. Okay, so there is one more aspect that I would like to talk about. So you'll notice on this run that my party is in pretty rough shape, to where like Tifa is in danger of dying when we do get the battle. One more little thing about all of this is let's say here that my party was in as rough of shape as it was there. Once again, when you are moving here, if you were to menu while you are moving, that does the fraction RNG index offset that if we want via manipulation, awesome. You can move and you can do your menu that's part of your manip, and you can choose to heal your party during the menu. Yeah? However, what if you need to heal your party, but your manip doesn't have any menus on it? Well, it's easy. All you do is stop moving, and menu. If you menu without moving, then you won't do any damage to your fractions or your RNG index. They won't be affected. You can sit here and menu all day as long as you're not moving, and you'll be totally fine. And then go on your merry way after you do your menu. So there you go. If you have to heal your party, you can do it that way. So all right, we are just taking a 0-0 manip here at 128.44. The party is already healed. Once again, the part where you cut down to the right is about at this like dot right here. It's just so that when you go down right, you get into this part of the grass, you know. And that's just for lower danger incrementation. And we are off to the Chocobo Ranch for the next part of the run. And oh boy, the next part of the run is a doozy.